Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth. Dive into The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, a compelling exploration of the role violence plays in anti-colonial struggles. Set against the backdrop of the Algerian War, this book wrestles with the provocative question, is violence a necessary path to liberation? In clear and direct prose, the summary unravels the complex relationship between colonial power and violence, revealing how force becomes both a tool of oppression and a necessary means of resistance. You'll discover arguments surrounding the necessity of revolutionary violence, understand the effects of spontaneous uprisings, and examine the transition from colonialism to neocolonialism. This enriching overview not only highlights the psychological impacts of colonial oppression but also underscores the importance of reclaiming cultural identity as a seminal force in the path toward true freedom. Prepare to engage with insights that challenge the status quo and illuminate the enduring spirit of those who fight for liberation.
The imperative of violence. In the throes of the Algerian War during the mid-20th century, colonial violence and repression left no room for passive resistance. The colonial regime, entrenched in brutality, demanded a confrontation in the only language it knew, force. This era unravels the stark reality that for the colonized, revolutionary violence was not merely a means of defense but a vital instrument for reclaiming dignity and autonomy. The colonial powers wielded brutal tactics, warfare, systemic oppression, and cultural domination, to maintain their grip on territories. These oppressive systems perpetuated not just physical violence but also psychological warfare, aiming to obliterate native identities in favor of colonizer culture. Negotiations and dialogues were inadequate against this backdrop, as the urgency of reclaiming heritage and autonomy was far too immediate. Economically and politically, the colonial structure thrived on exploitation and inequality, viewing the native population as economic tools rather than human beings. Here, violence emerged as a necessary response to systemic subjugation and slavery. The Algerian resistance fighters embodied this necessity, as their struggle was underpinned by the choice between passive endurance of tyranny or active uprising. Their actions, through guerrilla warfare against French forces, became a powerful narrative of agency, solidarity, and self-determination, redefining their identities and futures. Understanding the dynamic requires seeing through the eyes of the colonized, who strived not merely for inclusion within a colonial framework but for total liberation. The fight was not a pursuit of equal status within the system but a quest to dismantle it entirely and reclaim their land and identity. The urgency of their struggle made violence seem not only justifiable but obligatory, a collective demand for justice and a refusal to remain silent under oppression. This historical discourse is a poignant reminder that revolutionary violence served as a counter-echo to foundational violence, a courageous assertion that the oppressed would no longer be the last. It stands as a testament to the relentless spirit of those who chose to resist and forge a path to freedom, transforming the narrative of survival into a powerful chronicle of emancipation and identity reclamation. Spontaneous fury unleashed. Within the heat of oppression lies a latent force ready to burst forth in spontaneous violence. This eruption, driven by raw emotion rather than orchestrated ideology, wields an elemental power that commands respect. Its unpredictability makes traditional countermeasures ineffective, drawing diverse groups to converge against a common adversary. The contagious fervor of this insurrection ignites a powerful uprising. However, spontaneity alone is fraught with limitations. Although the intense anger can unify movements temporarily, it often lacks the necessary strategic depth to forge lasting change. Unorganized violence, powerful but unguided, risks fading rapidly without forming the backbone of a revolution. Moreover, colonizers exploit this disarray, sowing distrust among rebels and dividing their ranks. Without broad representation, the leaders of such uprisings face suspicion, seen as pursuing personal agendas rather than collective freedom. To truly challenge oppressive structures, revolutionary efforts must transform the raw energy of spontaneous violence into structured and strategic action. Emotional outbursts should be harnessed as a catalyst within a greater movement, one grounded in a unified commitment to justice. Organized liberation movements must weave these violent bursts into broader strategic objectives, using them as the spearhead of disciplined change efforts. Achieving meaningful transformation requires a symbiotic rela. Shadows of freedom. As colonial rule fades into history, nations once under its thumb awaken to a new dawn of independence, marked by a burgeoning national consciousness. This awakening, however, brings with it the stark realization that the departure of colonial powers does not automatically translate into genuine freedom. Instead, nations must navigate a treacherous landscape where neocolonialism threatens to undermine their hard-won independence. Revolutions kindle the hope of building societies grounded in indigenous history and culture, yet in the absence of a common colonial adversary, national unity often falters. The former unity forged in opposition now reveals internal fissures, between intellectuals and warriors, urban dwellers and rural peasants. In this fragile setting, nationalism fails to seamlessly unify diverse groups, potentially stifling dissent and leading to new forms of oppression. Charismatic leaders may emerge as champions of anti-colonial rhetoric, only to ultimately prioritize personal power over true liberation. The gravest threat looms in the guise of neocolonialism. While military forces retreat, global economic behemoths step in, brandishing financial instruments that cleverly mask modern empire building. Vulnerable nations, desperate for financial support, often find themselves ensnared by enticing loans and investments that bind their economies with invisible shackles. The departure of colonialists paves the way for multinational corporations to acquire critical infrastructure, ensuring that profits flow outward while leaving local economies drained. This economic dominance, detached from political governance, marks a sinister shift. Newly sovereign states risk becoming economic vassals despite the facade of independence. The national consciousness that once clamored for cultural liberation now stands impotent against this subtle form of control. Without a concerted effort to reform economic policies fundamentally, the economic landscape remains unchanged, allowing foreign capital to perpetuate a cycle of bondage through financial means rather than direct military intervention. It serves as a stark warning to revolutionary movements that triumph in political arenas may yet translate into defeat if economic sovereignty is not achieved. The struggle for true freedom extends beyond shifting flags and anthems. It is rooted in the quest for self-reliance and dismantling the financial underpinnings of modern empire. Only by wresting control of their economies can nations hope to fulfill the promises of independence and ensure that their national consciousness remains a potent force for lasting emancipation. Culture's revival journey. As the grip of colonialism loosens, reclaiming and revitalizing national culture becomes essential for healing and empowerment in liberation movements. This task, however, encounters challenges in defining the revival of native culture after enduring extended periods of colonial domination. It's a demanding process that involves reimagining national culture despite generations marred by physical and psychological violence, as well as the influence of colonial mindsets. When native thinkers emulate colonial cultures without transformative action, they risk perpetuating the same oppressive structures they aim to dismantle. The pathway to cultural renewal involves more than merely minimizing colonial influence, it demands a comprehensive restructuring of daily life. This includes consciously reconnecting with historically rooted identities and thoughtfully integrating or refining traditional cultural elements. Reclaiming culture is not about resurrecting a static memory but about engaging in a dynamic and interactive process. Culture inherently evolves, absorbing various influences, which must be embraced while maintaining core values to guide change. Avoiding a reactionary form of fundamentalism ensures culture remains open to progress and diversity. For a cultural renaissance to thrive, it must pivot from nostalgic retrospection to vibrant innovation. Cultural resilience is built not solely on past glories but through active participation in shaping a self-determined and equitable future. This involves embedding ancestral practices and community heritage within new social and economic paradigms, preventing hypernationalism by ensuring that cultural identity remains linked to tangible action. The journey of cultural regeneration involves careful examination, experimentation, and debate, acknowledging potential missteps along the way. As long-held colonial beliefs dissipate and young minds are nurtured with cultural wisdom rather than foreign indoctrination, national culture can flourish autonomously. Through patience and persistence, revolutionary change can take root and blossom, leading to a culture that thrives on its own terms. Healing invisible wounds. Colonial oppression brings more than physical subjugation, it inflicts deep mental wounds that echo across generations. Beyond the overt brutality of conquest lies a more insidious form of violence, psychological trauma. This subtle warfare targets the heart of a culture, unraveling identities and fraying social bonds more effectively than weapons ever could. Colonizers employ overt tactics, like torture and public executions, to instill dread and submission. Women endure strategic sexual violence, degrading their status and shattering family unity. At the same time, cultural annihilation works quietly to estrange people from their roots. Traditional customs are replaced with foreign impositions, erasing native languages and histories from schools and public discourse, thereby severing generations from their heritage. Daily life under colonial rule assaults mental well-being with relentless verbal harassment and exclusionary economic practices. Constant exposure to such microaggressions breeds self-loathing and division among the oppressed, manifesting in community fractures, addiction, and despair. The most perilous outcome is the adoption of colonizer values, perpetuating a cycle of dehumanization where native culture is synonymous with weakness. Understanding this nuanced psychological trauma is vital for addressing the roots of colonial wounds. Remember, revolution is as much a mental awakening as it is a physical uprising. The oppressed often find catharsis in reclaiming power through acts that reject internalized shame. For genuine freedom, transformative societal uplift must heal psychological scars alongside physical ones. True decolonization demands a complete reimagining of society, pairing cultural revival with economic and political empowerment. Success is fleeting without striking a balance between tangible victories and the deep healing of colonial mindsets. Counteracting mental violence involves acknowledging its role in maintaining political dominance and paving the way for emancipation. Communities must rediscover their cultural identity and unite in purpose, as any lasting revolution must reconcile past traumas to champion enduring freedom.
In The Wretched of the Earth, Frantz Fanon profoundly explores the intricate dynamics between colonizers and the colonized, emphasizing the intense necessity of revolutionary violence as a response to a world built on brutal subjugation. The book underscores the psychological and physical dimensions of colonialism, presenting violence not merely as an act of aggression but a reclaiming of identity and dignity. As it dissects spontaneous violence's strengths and limitations, Fanon prompts us to consider structured and strategic political movement as indispensable. Furthermore, the transition from colonialism to neocolonialism reveals the enduring tug-of-war for power and identity amidst a new kind of exploitation. Ultimately, the quest for freedom demands a deep cultural awakening and psychological healing to challenge the latent mental scars of colonial rule. With these insights, the book delivers a powerful reminder that genuine liberation extends beyond political victories to a profound transformation of minds and societies.